Good morning, Boker Tov. If anybody remembers the Hebrew that I tried to teach. Um, I want to start off by saying I hope that you enjoyed your reading this week. Hope you saw that this is more than just numbers. It's about people. I also needed to apologize to you. I watched my YouTube video of myself last week. And I noticed that towards the end, I actually had a misspeak. And what I had said was that Judah was the tribe that would not receive any land, and that is so wrong. It was the tribe of Levi that does not receive any land to develop because they're too busy. They're going to have priests and taking care of the tabernacle. So again, I'm apologizing, but I'm also letting you know that I am not a professional speaker by any means, okay? And I'm coming up with a new motto now, that if you have any doubt, check it out. And I mean, check it out by God's word, because his word is the truth. Now, did everybody get handouts? Okay. So we're going to start off this week with chapters 19 through 27. I'm going to give you a little background and kind of a timeline here, is that these chapters are believed to have occurred toward the end of Israel's wandering in the desert. You got it there on your handout, you can read it. Also, it is believed that most of the previous generation by this time had passed away, but it appears that God was closely monitoring the current generation for their sins the predecessors had been committing. And we have seen this reiterated back in Exodus 25, and again in our numbers last week, where the sins of the fathers goes down to the third and the fourth generations. Remember that? Okay. So I'm going to also give you a little heads up here. You're going to find plenty of the 3 R's this week in your reading. Also, I want you to look for items of symbolisms that point to Jesus. Now, for this week's reading's theme, I have testing and appointing leaders of the second generation of Israelites. So let's get started. By now, the people were accustomed to the clean and unclean laws that Moses had given that were handed to him from God. So they knew about this. Unfortunately, they developed a fear of being defiled by the corpses. And obviously, with this previous generation passing away, there were going to be a lot of corpses as well as animal corpses. So there's going to be fear, and I witnessed some fear yesterday. And my example of that fear is that my dog was with me when I'm trying to prepare and get ready for this presentation, and the thunder started going off. She started panting, and oh my goodness, it was just so, terrible for her, and I felt so bad, and I wanted to calm her down. So what I did is I went and I got some cheese and some Benadryl and gave it to her. Some of you are laughing, yeah, you understand. So likewise, God provides a solution to calm down these Israelites from their defilement. And what he does is he instructs Moses on how to prepare purifying water. The first thing that they are going to need is a red heifer. And up on the screen there, you see a red heifer. And heifer just implies that it's a female. Okay, so it's a red cow. Of course, it is to be unblemished. And along with this cow, what they're going to do is they're going to take it outside of camp. Typically, the priest would take it outside of camp and burn it. And they're going to burn it until it turns into ash. Along with that heifer, they're also going to use cedar wood and some hyssop and also some wool. And I want you to read to find out, because this is a hint for one of those items, what color the wool was. So anyway, they burn all of these things into ash, and then they collect the ash, and it is to become the purifying water. So as those people that were unclean because they touched a corpse, of course they're going to be outside of the camp, they are to add this ash to running water and sprinkle it on themselves. They use a hyssop branch and sprinkle it on themselves on the 3rd and the 7th day while they're outside of camp. And so then that night after the 7th day, they're clean and they come back into camp. Just a little side note, I know I'm going into the weeds here, but on one of my commentaries that I read, actually if you read that you put ash together with some of these ingredients and so forth, that it actually makes lye. And as some of you may know, lye is soap. So I just found that interesting. Off into the weeds, we're going to get back. So speaking of water, we know that in any desert, there is a limited supply of water. So the people began to complain again. They did not have fresh water. They wanted fresh water. So Aaron and Moses go into the tent and ask God, what are we going to do for these people? And God instructs them. He tells them, I want you to gather all the people around so that they can witness my miracle that I'm going to perform. And just go ahead and bring your staff along with you. And then speak to the rock. And the rock will bring forth the water that they need, the fresh water. So Aaron and Moses do what they're told, and they gather all the people around. But by this time, they're hot, they're probably tired, and they're feeling the burden of the Israelites. So they get by the rock, and they take the staff and hold it up and say, must we bring you the water out of this rock? And they hit the rock twice. That isn't exactly what God was asking them to do. And luckily for Moses, his actions did not break his relationship with God, but demonstrating a disrespect for the holiness of God needed to be addressed. So God's response for Moses and Aaron's actions was a judgment. And the judgment was that neither one of them would enter the promised land. God's response to the people, of course, was he gave them grace. He gave them fresh water. And again, I've got another hint for your symbolism. Water, John 4:10-14. Traveling on, they're getting closer to Canaan now, but they come to the land of Edom. And the Israelites are actually the descendants of Esau. If you remember back in Exodus, that Esau is Jacob, or Israel, that's the other name that they use for Jacob. He's his older brother. So this is family, the people that are living in the land. And so Moses decides, well, I better ask permission before we just go traipsing through there with our new nation. And he sends a messenger to the king of Edom, and the king sends back, nope, we don't want you walking through our land. So Moses thinks, well, maybe I didn't word it just right. So he kind of puts it in a little bit better wording and says, all we're going to do is we're just going to walk right through. We're not going to mess with anything. We're not trying to take you over. We're just going to walk right through. And again, they get no. So Moses goes around and goes another way, kind of around Edom. The next thing you're going to find is, once again, complaining. But this time, it's about the fact that they're even in the desert and the wilderness, and they've been wandering around. Why are you doing this to us, Moses? Why, God, do we have to be in this land? Obviously, they either had forgotten or didn't understand it was because their parents sinned. Their parents were the ones that refused to go into the promised land. Their parents were rebelling against God. So their punishment was that they were going to have to travel around for over 40 years. So now, the holy judgment of God ends up sending down fiery snakes. And when they say fiery in some versions, it's also poisonous or venomous. So they're deadly snakes. And you can see up here, oh, nope. Did I skip something? Over on the right side is some of what God is going to have Moses prepare for them, okay? Because people are starting to die. And because they're starting to die, they admit that, oh my goodness, maybe it's our own sin that is causing this curse upon us. So they confess to Moses, and they ask Moses to do something about it. Ask God to just take away all the snakes. Well, God's grace was given, but not exactly how they expected. Moses was instructed to create this pole with the serpent on it out of bronze. And he was to instruct the people that if you're bitten, all you need to do is look up at the pole and just have faith that God will heal you. And he will. And he did. Similarly, on the right side, you can see that we merely need to accept Jesus' crucifixion at the cross on our behalf to heal our sin. Therefore, the statue was a foreshadow of Jesus on the cross bearing our sin. Now, over time, Israel develops a cohesive nation. They're starting to fight together, and with God's help, they're winning. They're having lots of different battles, and they're winning. And so things are going well for them. And you'll hear a mention about a book of wars of the Lord. Now, I looked up on Amazon, and there are some titles of books called this very title. But don't let Amazon fool you. This is an ancient book which is considered one of the lost books of Israel. So they are not one and the same. Don't waste your money. But it was in that book that it appeared the book contains a lot of songs and poems that the Israelites were to kind of recite and remember these battles that they had been through and how God had carried them. So we too today sing songs and read poems that remind us of our past. So the word has spread about Israel's success in battle. And now King Balak of Moab decides that he needs to hire a diviner to curse Israel. And you're going to read about another incredible event involving a donkey. And this picture hopefully should be a hint there of what's going to happen. But I'm not going to narrate this story for you. I want you to read it in your Bible, please. It's rather interesting, and I just think this picture was a good depiction of that story. And indeed, in 2 Peter 2:15, 16, you're going to find that God used a speechless animal to rebuke the diviner. His name was Balaam, who loved the wages of wickedness. Now, Balaam repents by speaking only the words God gives him when he actually arrived at King Balak's place. And because he repented, he only used God's words. And those words were actually 3 blessings and 4 prophecies in favor of Israel. So God was able to work out good for something what was intended for bad. While Israel remained in Shittim, there were some Moabite women who started to seduce the men from Israel. And by seduce, yes, I do mean sexually. Also, they invited them to big parties that had the sacrifices to their God, not our true God, and eating the food from those sacrifices. And it got so bad that there was over 20,000 people, men, involved in these things that made God very angry. So at one point, there was even a woman that came into camp. This was happening, I'm assuming more, I can't think of the word. Anyway, more often than we think. But this woman came in particularly with a man, and right there in front of all the other Israelites, they went into their tent. Well, a grandson of Aaron, his name is Phinehas, he was very zealous for the Lord. He loved the Lord. And he did not want to see this continue to plague the people of Israel. So he took his spear and he went to the tent and he stabbed both of them, killing them. And this was attributed to Phinehas by God, so much so that he gave them a permanent priesthood between him and his descendants, because he stopped this sin that was just rampant. The woman that was slain during this event, she was actually the daughter of a Midianite chief. Ergo, the Midianites became enemies of Israel. Now, after all this death, a second census needed to be done. Again, men 20 plus were to be soldiers in God's army, of course excluding the Levites. And in addition to counting them for their service, they were also to be counted so that we would know how to distribute the land. And I've got a map up here of, you can see the different Levite tribe, or excuse me, not Levite tribe, but Simeon's tribe, Judah's around it, and all the different tribes and where they were going to be. This will come up again next week. So I'm moving on to another inheritance type dilemma. And what that was Zeledha Fachad's daughters. Their father had passed away because he was that previous generation. They needed an inheritance. They needed some land, but none of them were married. And so they went to Moses and they asked him, they said, what are we to do? We aren't married and we need some place to live. So Moses worked it out, and you can see here, that here's the daughters, and can you flip it back? They were part of the Manasseh tribe, and so that's the land where they were given. Thankfully, our inheritance is not of this world. Our inheritance is the kingdom of heaven. Ephesians 1:13, 14. In the last part of your reading, we're going to end with Joshua being commissioned by Moses, and he is to bestow some of his authority on him to be leader, and he's also to team up with Eleazar, which is Aaron's son, to help make decisions. Now, I missed a spot, so I'm going to backtrack real quick. Okay, after they went to Edom and they went another way, they stopped at Mount Hor. And while they were at Mount Hor, God told Moses that he wanted Moses and Aaron and Phinehas to go up the mountain, and when he was up there, he would tell them what to do. So they climb the mountain, they get up there, and Moses tells Aaron to remove his garment. So Moses removes his garment, and as you remember, this is where the garment's supposed to be, that there's the breastplate and then underneath is the fahad, and that is kind of like an apron to me. And then you've also got the blue robe underneath the ephod, and of course the bells and all the other items. So he gives that to Eleazar. And the next thing you know, Moses and Eleazar are coming down the mountain, and they end up staying in camp for 30 days. You'll need to find out by reading what happened to Aaron. So that's why Joshua and Eleazar are to team up with this second generation going into Canaan. Now, as far as the Urim, yes, Debbie.
You told us that Moses, Aaron, and Phineas.
Or excuse me, not Phineas. I misspoke. Oh, thank you for checking on me, Debbie. Good job.
Michelle brought
Oh, okay. It was not Phineas. Eleazar.
Thank you.
Eleazar, you're right. So, no one knows what the Urim was, what the item was, because it seemed to be lost around the same time as the ark. We know that nobody knows where the ark is. It was lost around the same time. But moreover, we as God's people must turn to the Lord's word when we have questions, and that's where we'll find our answers. Remember as you read this week to be watching for the 3 R's. Next week, we'll cover the final chapters of Numbers, which should be manageable because most of it is repetitive information. As I told you, that's kind of how the Hebrews are. You hear it over and over again. Well, I'm going to thank my donkey friend for letting me know that I've talked too much, and I need to let you guys get on with your prayer time. Thank you.